Hello, namaste, and welcome to Delhi. I'm Devina Gupta, and this is Work Life India on the BBC, the show that looks at all things to do with money, the work we do, and the lives we lead. Now, 50 years ago, a long cherished dream was finally realized when man set foot on the moon. The impossible was made possible, but it came with a hefty price tag. The total Apollo program cost around $25 billion. Now, India is famous for its low-cost space program, and next week it is launching a mission to soft land a rover on the south pole of the moon. So we're asking, can India corner a larger share of the commercial space market? For the thousands of years, the human race has looked at the sky with intrigue, hoping to unravel the mysteries of the universe. What lies beyond what we can see, and what are the final frontiers? Many questions remain to be answered, so will India's latest lunar mission be a giant leap for its space program? And more importantly, will it bring in the cash? To talk all about it, we have in the studios Dr. Susmita Mohanty. She's a serial space entrepreneur and CEO of Earth to Orbit. Welcome, Susmita.
Thank you, Devina. Wonderful to be here.
We also have Dr. Rajeswari Pillai Rajagopalan, who is the head of nuclear and space policy in Observer Research Foundation and will be throwing light on India's space policy. Welcome, Rajeswari.
Thank you very much for having me here, and it's great to be part of this conversation.
And while bringing the average age down on this table is Rifath Shaarook, who is a student scientist, just 19 years old, and 2 satellites older, I must add on that. He is with Kidz India, and he is a chief technology officer there. And he's come to our studio to talk all about his new venture. And we have a little small satellite just on the table, which is made of a 3D carbon fiber. We'll talk about that, but welcome, Rifath.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, Rifath, let me take you first with this question that you are just 7 years old when you decided that, hey, I want to build satellites. And it all started with a bet with your father. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So it was one fine day, India was launching INSAT 4C satellite, and my father watching that launch, and it was a failure. The rocket failed. It exploded. So I told my dad I could build a better system. And he challenged me, okay, then do it. So that is the moment I thought of I should get into the space industry and how it all started.
And did you think that you would actually beat him to this bet at that time?
No.
No? Well, Susmita, your father was also a scientist. So were there conversations around space travel, planet without gravity, alternate universe around dinner table? What fascinated you to this world?
So I grew up with the pioneers of the Indian space program in the early 70s. That's when Vikram Sarabhai had started recruiting people to run the space program, and my dad was one of the first recruits. So yes, I did grow up amongst people. I could walk into their homes and talk about ideas that I had about, say, living in outer space, which is my passion. And the cool thing about the pioneers is that they were Renaissance people. Mm-hmm. So I could talk about architecture, design, technology, just about anything. And yes, that had a big impact on my life.
Wow. And Rajeshwari, you were actually one of the very few women economists and policy speaker in this space. When you talk about India, how are people reacting to the way India has grown from having a mission to Mars, from sending a spacecraft to orbit the moon, and now planning a manned space mission in 2022? How are people looking at India?
So I got into the space domain a decade ago, and it was a purely selfish-driven reason that got me into it. But I did quickly find out that this was a limited voice for India, that the global debates, when you looked at it, the number of people who had spoken about India's space program or policy were far and few, whether it is at the United Nations or within the European Union or the ASEAN Regional Forum. You had people from the officers from the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, going to some of these meetings, but many a time you didn't really see them speak up. So in a sense, the Indian voice was completely missing in that sense. So 10 years ago, when I got into the space, I thought there was a gap in the perspectives known around the world, and I started writing about it, and so that was how I got into it. And it's been an exciting times because you had the Chandrayaan-1, the moon
Which
mission,
is the moon vehicle?
moon vehicle, the first mission that happened in October 2008. Then you had the Mars mission in 2014, and then of course now we are on the eve of the Chandrayaan-2, the second moon mission that is set to happen. So it's very exciting times, and also the times when you have the global governance debates picking up momentum.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that. But Susmita, I want to come to you on this, that how has India leapfrogged when it comes to small satellite launches? Because be it the US, the UK, Finland, France, we're having satellite launched from these countries from India. What kind of satellites are these, and where does India stand in that club?
So launching a satellite into orbit is not an easy affair. There are only 7 launch-capable nations in the world, and India is one of them. And any launch-capable nation typically has 2 rockets. One that launches your Earth observation satellites, so that is low Earth orbit, and the other one is a heavy lifter, which takes you to 36,000 kilometers from the Earth over the equator for ComSats, the heavy tonnage communication satellites. So for India, the little the launcher for Earth observation satellites, the PSLV. And if you look at the businesses worldwide, there are quite a few new constellation ideas that are being floated. And we will need more and more launch opportunities for these small satellites in low Earth orbit. And I think that's where the PSLV is in a very sweet spot. The only competitors the PSLV really has, if you ask me, is the European Vega, which is a relatively younger rocket. The Russian competitor, the Dnieper, has been phased out. There's a company out of New Zealand called Rocket Labs. They're also trying to build a small satellite launcher. So I think the PSLV, if we do things right, we already have captured a significant chunk of the small satellite launch market, and we can make it even bigger.
So in fact, a record 4 satellites on one mission in a low-cost budget. Yes, I will come to you, but Rifath, I want to ask you this, because we have a small satellite, which is just like a square box. It's a cube which can fit onto your palm of your hand, in fact, and it's black in color. It's got chips inside it, and it has been on a rocket in NASA. Tell us about this.
So basically, it's a CalamSat 1 we launched with NASA in 2017. The main mission goal is to 3D print the structure and test the performance of commercially off-the-shelf components, and it performed very well. And after that, in 2019 January, we launched a little bit bigger version of the same with ISRO's PSLV, and it's still in orbit.
And the idea actually came from an Indian sweet called Gulab Jamun, which is just a small dough ball.
Yeah.
And why is it that 64 gram, which is less than a kg, this kind of satellite, what were the challenges that you faced while thinking about this idea till the point of realization?
The main problem is you have to put the communication system, and that communication system needs a lot of power. So you have to put the battery and solar panels, everything inside. And it needs antenna. So at the end of the day, the problem is shrinking everything, and successfully we did that. And it's a long way to go. Now we are able to successfully transmit text signals using this. Now we are developing technologies to transmit image data.
But how did it all happen? Were you on the internet reading off what are the systems in which you can put into a satellite? Is the information readily available? And how did you get your team together?
We started building satellites when I was in 9th standard. I just went through the NASA's article, and I thought, I should build a satellite. It started as a fun. Then we really built a satellite which was weighing around 1 kg. Okay. But then we were searching for launch providers, like Susmita told. We got a quote of around $80,000 for 1 kg. So in space, the mass and the volume is directly proportional to the cost for the launch. So we thought we should reduce the size. And one fine day we were eating gulab jamun, and we thought, why don't we build a satellite small as gulab jamun?
And that's what happened. Well, tell me something about this, Susmita, because is Rifath at also the new generation in India is at an advantage because you actually wrote letters to Bill Gates and Arthur Clarke asking for money because you wanted to go and study about space and the dynamics around it, and that course wasn't available in India, so you actually chose France for it.
Well, actually, India does have very good aerospace engineering courses. So the reason I wanted to go to France was not so much to get another degree, but to be part of the International Space University community. And this was pre-internet, and I was trying to raise $35,000 in under 8 months. That's when I wrote to a number of people. But I think India, in many ways, there are universities offering programs. So young kids like Rifath who want to pursue a career in space, in fact, they can pursue any engineering. You don't have to pursue aerospace per se.
Well, basically, I'm from EC background.
You're from?
EC.
Easy background. Okay. But Rajeshwari, tell me this, because every time India talks about the multi-billion-dollar it's spending on space mission, there's always a criticism. What about the 22% of our population which is living in extreme poverty? Can India afford a space mission?
Yeah, and I think this has been an old debate going back to for instance, on the Indian defense budget when we spent close to 2% of the GDP on defense spending. So this is an old debate. So now you can actually move into a bread versus satellite kind of debate about why should India spend on space program when you have millions of people living under poverty. But I think I see two primary benefits to this. One is from a sort of a global commercial space market, which is set to grow in the coming years as well. For instance, when India did the Mars mission and even earlier the Chandrayaan mission and now going to do the Chandrayaan 2 mission, there has been a lot of criticism because these missions are not seen as directly benefiting the people. So why India should do this and so on and so forth. The benefit is that when India did the Mars mission, it brought about a bigger profile for India as a country as a whole on the first place. And second, also brought into highlight India's growing space prowess in a sense. The sophistication of India's space capabilities that India can do. Especially the Mars mission was India got it right in the first attempt. India was the first Asian country to do. So the rising of the profile itself was a big thing, and that actually brought in a lot of the countries from the Latin American region, from the African continent again, to look at India as a possible destination for launching satellites. So that's the first major thing. Second important consideration is the India's voice to be heard at the global governance debate. If India wants a seat at the high table, India needs to do what I call this sound and light show from time to time.
But Susmita, I want to get you there because you have said in the past as well that India's space program is generally controlled by the government. It's sort of a monopoly when it comes to launching a satellite. And does a private player like you have space there? Are you able to change things easily than 10 years back?
So having started companies, Devina, one in San Francisco and then one in Vienna in Europe, in Austria, and now in India, I think the Indian space program, the way it is today, the government does have a monopoly. But I do think that we've been having interactions, we meaning the young entrepreneurs in Bangalore and outside of Bangalore. So I think now the government the ISRO is coming around to they need a mindset change. You know, they were looking at us as competitors.
So ISRO being the Indian Space Research Organization,
the equivalent of NASA in India, yes. So I think now they're coming around to, and the day they start looking at us as allies, as people who have agile business models, who can do things, disrupt technologies in ways that a large agency cannot, we will complement each other. So as yet, we don't have a funding ecosystem in the country for young entrepreneurs such as myself. The revenues for my company came from my clients abroad. But will it change? I am hoping it will. In fact, we are advocating that whatever we are spending on the space program, if it's $1.5 billion, a significant amount should be set aside for innovation through entrepreneurs. So let's say 10%. It's a very modest amount, but I think we can do fantastic things.
So is funding easily available to you, Rifath, when you come out with the ideas of having satellites? And which is the sector where it is most popular and there are people who are ready to back you with that kind of a satellite?
Actually, getting funds for the space development is one of the toughest thing in the industry. If you're developing some AI or blockchain kind of thing, you can easily get the investment. But if you're building some kind of satellite, it's tough.
And which is the one category of satellites which is right now booming?
remote sensing and communication, because Planet Labs is already there, and communication, we definitely need that because we already have a lot of communication satellites.
Also like OneWeb and...
Yeah, OneWeb is basically building an IoT
now I want to come to that because Rajeshwari, in the US, you have this culture of promoting entrepreneurship. You have SpaceX by Elon Musk. You have Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and everybody who knows anybody is going to Amazon also to pitch an idea about space technology. Is India lagging behind there?
India is certainly lagging behind. What ISRO has done, the Indian Space Research Organization, in the last 2 years is purely driven out of compulsion. They have begun to reach out to certain companies, but still the model that they're looking at is outsourcing, not one that would create a level playing field for the private sector. So there have been a few companies that have been reached out to, whether it's Alpha Design for the manufacturing of satellite, Bellatrix, and so on and so forth. But when is that ISRO is going to open up this field so that they become, and like she said, they become allies and partnering, and that would actually improve the competitiveness of ISRO as a launching state in a sense. And especially given the global space considerations, ISRO has to step up the competitiveness, and that comes from bringing the private sector into. And
there is a new commercial arm that it has come out with, and hopefully we will achieve that. But I want to go now to what's the next big thing in the space, and everybody is asking about, we've talked about the man going to the moon, but what about families going to the moon? What about settling there? Or what about, going there for a holiday? How far away are we from that, Susmita, going and traveling from Earth to the other planets?
Well, I think let's start with orbital flights, as in taking a flight around the Earth. Technically, it's very, very feasible. And I think what happened to commercial aviation in the last century, it will happen to private spaceflight in this century. So you and I potentially could go up and go around the Earth. Yeah. If you can ride an extreme roller coaster, Devina, you can go into space.
And how many days? How many days of the roller coaster?
In 10 minutes, you're up in space.
Yeah. And how much time does it take?
It takes 90 minutes for an orbit at about 350 kilometers from the Earth.
Wow.
So 16 sunsets and sunrises in a day.
And your company has actually started designing already for the space suits that one would require to be in the moon.
Well, yes, my Vienna company designs things for human space exploration. So we design habitats, greenhouses, rovers, spacesuits, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And Rifath, for you, what's the next big thing? And what's the next big innovation that we're seeing from this young scientist team?
I personally believe we are particularly interested in shrinking the size of the satellites, because we believe, like back in the days, computers used to be the size of this room, and your smartphone itself is a computer. And already there are satellites which, they converted Android phones into satellites. And
Android phones are converted into satellites. We have an example which is smaller than that.
They are called phone sats.
Yes.
So basically we are trying to build indigenous components for cube satellites. And I'm happy to tell you our next launch is next month.
Next month, woohoo, we'll be watching out for that. Yeah. But tell me something, is that also a solution to what many have called a space debris problem? Because according to different estimates, there are anywhere between 70 to 75,000 tons of space debris up there.
Many people call the CubeSats as debris because most of the CubeSats are built by students for the education. But I strongly disagree with that, because these are the most eco-friendly satellites, because there are dedicated systems available for CubeSats to deorbit, and it's just a small thing. Like after 2 years or something, it will automatically deorbit. So it's one of the eco-friendliest option to do the space exploration.
Well, but Rajeshwari, what are the risks of space debris that we are not able to analyze till now, but it's up there?
Absolutely. Space debris is a huge challenge. It's already been a huge problem. In fact, we wrote an edited book a few years ago, and one of the chapters was written by the space agency head of the Ecuador Space Agency. And his chapter title was "It Happened to Us." And that is really the problem. The Ecuador had one and only satellite which was it was launched by the Russians. It was hit by the space debris praised from the Chinese anti-satellite test that was conducted in 2007. So that's already a big problem. And how do you clean up the space environment? I don't think you have clean, tested technologies demonstrated. There have been technology development in this regard, but
like the UK
Japanese,
is trying
UK is doing that. Japanese are doing some of this technology development. Switzerland is doing. But none of these are tested and kind of demonstrated in that sense. And I think there are also problems in terms of who decides what is to be brought down, which debris is a bigger problem, and what.
Sure, absolutely. You talked about anti-satellite missile, and India also did one test of anti-satellite missile earlier this year. Now, is space militarization a threat then? And will we see a space race to see who's got a better, safe system? And will this have a risk as well, Susmita?
I think space has been militarized for decades. The USSR and the United States have a large number of military satellites. China has entered the militarization space in recent years, and now India is joining that club. But it is nothing new. It's not that for the first time anti-satellite tests have been done. They've been done by the other countries, as I just
so
mentioned.
I would make a differentiation between militarization and weaponization, because militarization is something that we have been seeing that happen first from the first Gulf War, in a sense. So militaries around the world today use space for a number of passive military applications, what we call intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and so on and so forth. But what we are today seeing is the space weaponization, and those are the trends that we need to stop. And clearly, the anti-satellite tests are one demonstration of the space weaponization, which is something that need not happen. And there needs to be measures to reduce the tendency for more states to go down this path. But the Indian decision to demonstrate a capability came about after the first successful anti-satellite test conducted by China in January 2007. Since then, there has been quite a bit of debate within India on how we should protect our own satellites and so on and so forth.
But Rifath, is there a space race again now? Because now the US president has said we also want to revisit the moon with an astronaut in the next 5 years. NASA has seen a shift in its top order. And is that a good news for youngsters like you? Because this means more jobs.
Yeah, actually now we are living in an era of space race 2.0. And in this, private companies are involved. And it's really good it's not just like in the past space race, only the two governments were involved. But here, the race is happening between two companies. So it's a great news for youths like us. And there are a lot of startups coming like Team Indus. Of course, our company itself, a lot of things.
Yes,
happening.
Rajeshwari, you have a point.
You asked whether there was a risk in the kind of activities that we are engaged in. There's a big difference between space competition in the earlier era and space race.
What's that?
For instance, the US and USSR primarily were using space assets for strategic operations, nuclear missions, and so on and so forth. But today you're looking at the space being used for a conventional military operations, and the kind of, for instance, counter space capabilities, which include cyber and electronic warfare space in outer space playing out. And I think those are the kind of issues that make it much more risky to operate in outer space.
And what about the positives as well? Because now there's another concept called space mining. Now, those who haven't heard of it, you have a Japanese spacecraft, Hayabusa 2, that recently landed on an asteroid this week. And already there's an excitement about the minerals it will excavate. Susmita, is there a possibility of space mining, getting minerals from different planets and trying to make it work in India?
Yes, space resource mining will definitely become a reality. For those of you who are familiar with Luxembourg, it's a thimble of a country. But in recent past, it's sort of declared itself to be the financial and legal haven for all space resource mining companies. In other words, the Bahamas for space resource mining. There are companies in the US that claim that they want to go out on asteroid mining missions, but that's a little speculative at this time. And as you mentioned, I think Japan is the only country which has successfully taken a spacecraft to an asteroid and brought back a sample. But it's feasible. I think it's going to happen.
All right. Well, I'm completely towards the end of the show. So, Rifath, let me take this question from you very quickly. If somebody wants to follow your footsteps, a young scientist, what's the first thing that they should do, and what's the challenge they should be ready for?
They should realize the field first, what it is, because a lot of people think aerospace, the space industry is only for aerospace people, but the satellite is totally electronics, the mechanical is there, everything is there. So they should first explore the field before making the decision, and that's what I will recommend to the students, because a lot of people come to me and ask, I want to become a space scientist, should I take aerospace engineer? But if you ask, what field want you to do, I want to do space, satellites, then I'll tell, no, you should take ECE or computer science. So they should explore.
So be ready for what you want, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm sorry, I'm completely out of time, but it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And the future looks exciting, from India's first manned space mission by 2022 to the US planning to return astronauts to the moon by 2024. Each of these feats is a sheer acknowledgement of human determination and will. So keep reaching for the stars. You'll at least land on the moon. Thank you for joining us. Do tweet with hashtag WorkLifeIndia. You can also email us on Delhi_WorkLifeIndia@bbc.co.uk. Thank you.